Stop for a moment. Before you spend that old 1999 Connecticut Quarter, before you throw it into a vending machine, before you put it back into your pocket, and especially before you assume that it is just another ordinary 25-cent coin, take another look. Turn it over. Look at the tree. Look at the date. Look at the tiny details. And then look closely at the mint mark, because although millions of 1999 Connecticut Quarters were produced, some examples can become much more interesting when condition, errors, varieties, and preservation enter the story. Now I want to make something clear right from the beginning. This is not a story where every 1999 Connecticut Quarter is secretly worth thousands of dollars. Most are not. But that's exactly what makes the search interesting. When a coin is common, you need to know what separates an ordinary example from an extraordinary one, and that is what we're going to discover today. The coin we're looking at is the 1999 Connecticut State Quarter, one of the first 5 state quarters ever released by the United States Mint. It was the 5th state quarter of the program. It was the final state quarter released in 1999, and it was also the last state quarter of the 20th century. But the most fascinating part isn't just the year, it's the tree. That tree is the legendary charter oak, and behind that tree is a story about Connecticut's colonial history, self-government, British authority, and a document that was supposedly hidden inside the tree to keep it from falling into British hands. So today we're going much deeper than simply asking, how much is this quarter worth? We're going to find out why this coin was made, what every major detail means, how to identify your particular version, what collectors look for, what condition can do to the value, what genuine mint errors can look like, and why some extraordinary examples have sold for dramatically more than face value. So if you have a 1999 Connecticut Quarter nearby, don't spend it yet. Keep it beside you, because by the end of this video you'll know exactly what to check. Chapter 1. What exactly is this coin? Let's start with the basics. The coin we're discussing is a United States quarter dollar dated 1999. It belongs to the famous 50 State Quarters program, a 10-year program that began in 1999 and honored all 50 states with special reverse designs. The U.S. Mint released 5 different state designs during each year of the program. The states were represented according to the order in which they ratified the Constitution or entered the Union. Connecticut was 5th, and that is why its quarter appeared 5th in 1999. The U.S. Mint officially released the Connecticut Quarter on October 12, 1999. It followed Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Georgia. So this coin isn't simply a quarter from an old year. It's part of the beginning of one of the most successful modern American coin programs. The U.S. Mint says that the state quarters program ultimately became a massive national collecting phenomenon, with an estimated 147 million Americans collecting the coins during the program. Think about that for a moment. A quarter normally exists to buy something. A quarter is supposed to move from one person to another. It goes through stores, banks, cash registers, pockets, vending machines, and coin jars. But in 1999, something changed. People began stopping their quarters from circulating. They began saving them. They began putting them into albums. They began searching for the states they were missing. And suddenly, the back of a quarter became something millions of people wanted to study. That's the world into which the 1999 Connecticut Quarter was born. Chapter 2. The front of the coin. Let's start with the obverse, or the front. The front features the familiar portrait of George Washington. This basic portrait had already been used on United States quarters for decades. Around Washington, we see the inscriptions that identify the coin as American currency. United States of America, liberty, in God we trust, and quarter dollar. The coin has a reeded edge, which means the edge contains a series of small grooves. This is a familiar characteristic of U.S. quarters. But here's something important. When you're searching for a valuable coin, don't just stare at the big design. Some of the most important information is tiny, and one of those tiny details is the mint mark. That small letter can tell you where the coin was produced, and that brings us to an important part of the search. Chapter 3. Find the mint mark. If you have a 1999 Connecticut Quarter, take a close look at the obverse. You may find a P or a D mint mark on a regular circulation example. P represents the Philadelphia Mint. D represents the Denver Mint. The U.S. Mint lists Philadelphia and Denver as the production facilities for the circulating Connecticut Quarter. And the coin in the photographs you've provided appears to be a 1999 Connecticut Quarter. That means it appears to be a Denver minted example. But don't make the mistake of thinking that the D automatically means the coin is rare. The mint mark is identification information. It's not a magic symbol that instantly turns a quarter into a fortune. And that's a very important lesson in coin collecting. A collector doesn't look at one detail. A collector looks at the whole coin. Date, mint mark, condition, strike, surface, errors, varieties, and sometimes even the exact grade. That's how you start separating the ordinary from the exceptional. Chapter 4. Turn the coin over. Now let's flip the quarter. And this is where the coin really becomes special. The reverse shows a large white oak tree. The inscription Connecticut appears above the design. The words the charter oak identify the tree, and underneath the design we see the dates 1788 and 1999, along with a pluribus unum. Now stop and look at that tree. It might appear to be nothing more than a nice image, but it represents one of the most famous stories in Connecticut history, and that story takes us back more than 300 years. Chapter 5. The Story of the Charter Oak. The story begins with Connecticut's colonial charter. In 1662, Connecticut received a charter under King Charles II. That charter was extremely important. It established Connecticut's boundaries and gave the colony a significant degree of self-government. But decades later, British authorities wanted the charter surrendered, and in 1687, Sir Edmund Andros arrived in Connecticut representing King James II. The objective was to take control of the charter. The confrontation became heated. The charter was reportedly on a table between the opposing sides. Then, according to the famous Connecticut story, the candles suddenly went out. The room became dark, and when the lights returned, the charter was gone. According to the traditional account, Captain Joseph Wadsworth had rescued the document. And where did he hide it? Inside a hollow section of a huge white oak tree. That tree eventually became known as the Charter Oak. Imagine the symbolism. A document representing self-government was supposedly hidden inside a tree, and that tree eventually became a symbol of Connecticut's determination to protect its rights. Whether you're looking at the story as history, tradition, or legend, its importance to Connecticut is undeniable, and that's why the tree eventually appeared on millions of quarters. Chapter 6. The tree didn't live forever. The charter oak itself eventually disappeared. The famous tree stood in Hartford, Connecticut until 1856. By then, it had already become a powerful historical symbol. The actual tree was gone, but the story survived. Its image survived. Its symbolism survived. And more than a century later, the U.S. Mint placed that image on a quarter. So think about what you're holding. A 1999 Connecticut Quarter may have been struck in a modern minting facility using modern machinery, but the image on the reverse reaches all the way back to colonial America. That is one of the reasons coin collecting is so fascinating. A coin can be modern while carrying a story that is centuries old. Chapter 7. Why 1788? Now let's focus on another tiny detail. The number 1788. If you've ever looked at this quarter without knowing the history, you may have wondered why that number is there. The answer is extremely important. Connecticut was the 5th state to ratify the U.S. Constitution. That happened in 1788. That's why the number appears on the quarter. The U.S. Mint specifically connects Connecticut State Quarter to its ratification of the Constitution and its status as the 5th state. So the quarter tells you a complete story. The Charter Oak represents Connecticut's colonial history. 1788 represents constitutional history. 1999 represents the State Quarters program. And the position of Connecticut in the State Quarter sequence represents its 5th place ratification. This isn't just a picture. It's a historical timeline compressed onto a small piece of metal. Chapter 8. Why 1999 matters so much. Now let's talk about the date itself. 1999. For most people, that's simply a year. But for coin collectors, 1999 was a major turning point. It was the first year of the State Quarters program. Before this program, people generally expected the quarters reverse to remain familiar. Then suddenly the design began changing. Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut. 5 designs in 1 year. The U.S. Mint described this as the first major change to circulating coin designs since the bicentennial period. That is why the 1999 quarters have a special place in modern U.S. coin collecting. And Connecticut has an additional distinction. It was the fifth and final quarter released that year. So if you're building a complete 1999 State Quarter collection, this is the coin that completes the first five. Chapter 9. The State Quarter Craze. Here's where the story gets really interesting. When the State Quarters program began, Americans didn't simply accept the new designs. They became obsessed with collecting them. People were checking their change. Stores were seeing customers examine quarters before putting them away. Parents bought albums for their children. Teachers used the coins as educational tools. And the mint saw extraordinary demand. The mint reported in October 1999 that more than 91 million American adults were actively collecting state quarters. And demand for quarters had doubled since the beginning of the program. That is a staggering number. And the Connecticut Quarter arrived right in the middle of that excitement. When Connecticut was released, people were already waiting for it. They knew it was coming. They wanted to complete their first five-state set. And the mint experienced such intense demand for Connecticut Quarter bags that it reported selling more than 62,000 bags containing about 7.3 million coins in less than 5 hours. That's how popular this program had become. Chapter 10. How many were made? Now let's address something very important. If the Connecticut Quarter was so popular, does that mean it's rare? Not necessarily. In fact, the opposite is closer to the truth for normal circulated examples. The 1999 Connecticut Quarter had a reported mintage of approximately 80,000 coins. That's more than 600 million examples from Denver alone. So when someone says, 1999 Connecticut Quarter, extremely rare, you should immediately ask, which one? Because the date alone isn't enough. A normal 1999 Connecticut Quarter is common. A normal circulated quarter is not automatically rare, but a specific high-grade example can be much harder to find, and a genuine mint error can be even more interesting. That distinction is the foundation of this entire video. Chapter 11. Common doesn't mean unimportant. There's a misconception in coin collecting that a coin must be rare to be interesting. That's simply not true. A coin can be common but historically important. The 1999 Connecticut Quarter is a perfect example. Hundreds of millions were made. But this was one of the first state quarters. It represents Connecticut. It features the charter oak. It connects to the Constitution. And it represents the end of the 20th century's first year of the State Quarters program. So even a normal example has a story. The value might only be face value. But the history is much bigger than 25 cents. Chapter 12. Now let's talk about condition. Here's where things change. Imagine two 1999 Connecticut Quarters. Coin number 1 has spent 20 years circulating. It has scratches. It has contact marks. It has worn surfaces. Maybe the tree isn't as sharp as it was when the coin left the mint. Now imagine coin number 2. It was taken from a roll immediately after production. It was stored carefully. It has strong luster, sharp details, very few marks, no obvious circulation wear. Both coins are dated 1999. Both have a D. Both have the same design. But collectors may value them very differently. Why? Because condition matters. Coin grading is essentially the process of evaluating the preservation and condition of a coin. And on modern coins, the highest grades can sometimes be surprisingly difficult to achieve. Chapter 13. What does MS mean? If you've been watching coin videos, you've probably heard terms like MS65, MS67, or MS68. MS means mint state. It generally refers to coins that show no evidence of circulation wear. The number following MS represents the grade. As you move higher, the standards become increasingly demanding. A coin that looks perfect to the naked eye may not necessarily be perfect under professional examination. Tiny marks can matter. The quality of the strike can matter. Surface preservation can matter. Luster can matter. And the difference between two high-grade coins can sometimes be extremely subtle. This is why you should never look at an online photograph of an MS68 coin and assume your circulated coin is the same. They're different categories. Chapter 14. A documented 2300 example. Now we get to one of the most interesting parts. There is a documented auction result for a 1999 Connecticut Quarter graded MS68. According to PCGS auction prices, one such example sold for $2,300 in 2018. Now listen carefully. That does not mean your ordinary 1999 Connecticut Quarter is worth $2,300. It doesn't. The coin in that auction was an exceptionally high-grade example. The grade was MS-68, and that's an enormous distinction. Imagine saying, a regular baseball card is worth 25 cents. Then someone shows you a rare, professionally graded version that sold for thousands. The same principle applies, and the date can be identical, the design can be identical, but condition can separate the coins dramatically. So when you hear a high value, always ask, what grade was that coin? Chapter 15. Why your coin may not be that 2300 coin. Let's look honestly at the coin in your photographs. It appears circulated. There are visible marks and wear. That doesn't make it bad. It simply tells us that we shouldn't compare it directly to an MS-68 example. The value of your particular coin cannot, honestly, be determined as thousands of dollars, just from the photograph. To make a serious valuation claim, you'd need to determine whether there is a genuine error, variety, or exceptional characteristic. That's the responsible approach, and this is something I want every viewer to understand. A high auction record is not the same thing as the value of every coin with that date. That's one of the biggest traps in online coin videos. Chapter 16. Errors can change everything. Now let's move into the area that gets collectors really excited. Mint errors. A mint error happens when something goes wrong during the manufacturing process. The coin might be struck incorrectly. It might not be properly centered. The collar might fail to contain the planche correctly. A layer might be missing. The coin could be struck more than once. Or another unusual production problem could occur. And when a genuine error escapes the mint and enters circulation, collectors may become very interested. But there is an extremely important warning. Not every damaged coin is an error. This distinction matters. Chapter 17. Error or damage. Suppose your Connecticut Quarter has a strange scratch. Is it valuable? Probably not. What if the edge is bent? That could simply be damage. What if the surface looks discolored? Again, it could be environmental damage. What if the coin was squeezed in a machine? That doesn't automatically make it a mint error. The key question is, did the feature happen while the coin was being manufactured? If the answer is yes, you may have something worth investigating. If it happened after the coin left the mint, it's generally considered damage rather than a mint error. This is why professional authentication can be extremely important. Chapter 18. Off-center strikes. One error type worth knowing is the off-center strike. Normally, the blank is positioned properly between the dies, but if something goes wrong, the blank can shift. The result can be a coin where the design is dramatically pushed toward one side. You might see an area of blank metal. Part of the design may be missing. The overall appearance can be very different from a normal quarter. A dramatic off-center strike can be collectible, but the degree of the error matters. A coin that's only slightly off-center isn't necessarily worth a fortune. Again, you have to look at the entire coin. Chapter 19. Broad strike errors. Another interesting type is a broad strike. A quarter is normally struck within a collar that helps control its shape. If that collar isn't functioning properly, the coin can spread outward during striking. The result may look wider or flatter than a normal quarter, and collectors can recognize these characteristics as evidence of a striking problem. This is another reason to examine the edge and rim of your Connecticut Quarter. If something looks unusually wide, don't immediately assume it's damage. But don't immediately assume it's an error either. Compare it carefully with a normal coin. And if the difference appears significant, consider getting an expert opinion. Chapter 20. Missing clad layer. Now let's talk about something even more interesting. A missing clad layer. Modern quarters are clad coins. That means their composition involves multiple layers rather than being a single solid metal. If a layer is missing because of a manufacturing problem, the coin can have an unusual appearance. The surface may look different from a normal quarter. This kind of error can attract collectors, and there are documented 1999 Connecticut Quarter error examples that demonstrate why this category matters. But once again, appearance alone is not enough. A coin can be chemically altered. It can be damaged. It can be exposed to environmental conditions. So if you believe you have a missing clad layer, professional examination is a much safer path than simply assuming it is valuable. Chapter 21. Don't clean your coin. Here's one of the most important rules in this entire video. If you think you have a valuable coin, do not clean it. Don't polish it. Don't scrub it. Don't use toothpaste. Don't use metal cleaner. Don't use chemicals. Don't try to make it shine. You may think you're making the coin look better, but you could actually damage the original surface. Collectors generally want coins with original surfaces, so if your coin looks old or dirty, that's okay. Leave it alone. Put it somewhere safe. Take good photographs and investigate it before doing anything else. Chapter 22. What about proof coins? There's another version of the Connecticut Quarter that collectors should know about. Proof coins. The U.S. Mint produced proof versions of the first 5 state quarters in 1999. These were made specifically for collectors. Proof coins are produced using specially prepared dies and planchets, creating a different appearance from normal circulation strikes. The Mint offered a 5-coin state quarters proof set containing Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, and Connecticut. So if you find a 1999 Connecticut quarter that looks unusually sharp and has a different finish, don't immediately assume it's an error. It might be a proof coin. This is another reason identification comes before valuation. First, figure out what you have, then figure out what it's worth. Chapter 23. The 1999 Proof Set. The Mint's 1999 5-coin state quarters proof set was specifically designed for collectors. It included all 5 state quarter designs from that first year. That means Connecticut was part of a historic group. Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Georgia, Connecticut, 5 coins, 5 states, 1 historic year, and the Connecticut coin completed the set. The Mint reported enormous interest in these products, with hundreds of thousands of proof sets sold, and very strong demand for state quarter collecting products. That tells you just how important this series became. Chapter 24. The coin in your pocket has a story. Think about how strange this is. You could find a Connecticut quarter today in ordinary change. You could receive it at a grocery store. You could find one in a coin jar. You could find one inside an old drawer. And yet that same quarter is connected to a national collecting movement that attracted tens of millions of Americans. It is connected to the story of Connecticut's charter oak. It is connected to the Constitution. And it belongs to the first year of a 10-year program that eventually honored every state. That's a lot of history for 25 cents. Chapter 25. What makes a 1999 quarter interesting? Let's make the search simple. When you find a 1999 Connecticut quarter, ask yourself several questions. First, what mint mark does it have? Second, how much circulation wear does it show? Third, are the surfaces original? Fourth, does anything appear to be a genuine mint error? Fifth, is it a regular circulation coin or a proof? And finally, could this coin potentially be in an unusually high grade? These questions are much more useful than simply asking, is 1999 rare? The answer to that question is no. The better question is this particular 1999 Connecticut quarter unusual? Chapter 26. What is your coin really worth? Now let's answer the question directly. If your 1999 Connecticut quarter is a normal circulated coin with no major error, you should generally think of it as a face value coin, not an automatic jackpot. That's the realistic answer. Millions were made. The 1999 D alone had a mintage of roughly 657.88 million, so a normal circulated example isn't rare simply because it says 1999. But the situation changes if you have an exceptional coin. A very high-grade example can be worth significantly more. A genuine mint error can also bring a premium, and certain certified examples have achieved impressive auction results. The key is that the coin has to qualify. Chapter 27, the 2300 question. Let's go back to that $2,300 number. It's a real documented auction result for a 1999 D, Connecticut Quarter graded MS68. So if someone asks, can a 1999 D, Connecticut Quarter ever sell for over $2,000? The answer is yes. But if someone asks, is my circulated 1999 D quarter automatically worth $2,000? The answer is no. That's the difference between an auction record and a normal market value. The auction example was an exceptional coin. The grade was extremely high, and there were specific reasons collectors were willing to pay that amount. So don't chase the biggest number. Chase the reason behind the number. That's how you become a better coin collector. Chapter 28. Why high grades are hard. Here's something many new collectors don't realize. Coin can be produced by the millions and still have very few examples in top condition. Think about what happens after a coin leaves the mint. It gets placed with thousands of other coins. Coins hit each other. They fall. They move through bags. They go into machines. They go into cash registers. They get carried in pockets. They rub against keys. They get dropped. They become scratched. And eventually, most examples show some kind of contact or wear. That means a coin that survives in nearly perfect condition can become much more interesting. This is one reason modern coins can have surprising high-grade values. Chapter 29. Look at the surface. When you're examining your quarter, don't just look at whether it shines. Look at the surface. Are there lots of tiny contact marks? Are there scratches across Washington? Are the fields clean? Does the coin have original luster? Are the details sharp? Does the tree show strong definition? Are the letters crisp? A professional grader examines many of these characteristics. You don't need to become a professional grader overnight, but learning to notice these things will make you much better at identifying potentially interesting coins. Chapter 30. The most important warning. I want to stop here for one important warning. If you see a video online saying, every 1999 Connecticut Quarter is worth $10,000, don't believe it automatically. If someone says, every D mint mark is rare, don't believe it automatically. If someone says, your quarter is worth thousands because it is old, don't believe that either. The coin market doesn't work that way. Values depend on actual characteristics. And for high-value claims, documented sales are much stronger evidence than random online asking prices. That's why in this video we're focusing on the real history of the coin and documented examples rather than promising that every quarter is a jackpot. Final. The last check before you spend it. So now you know the real story of the 1999 Connecticut Quarter. You know that it was released on October 12, 1999. You know it was the 5th state quarter. You know it was the final state quarter released that year. You know the Charter Oak represents an important chapter in Connecticut's colonial history. You know that 1788 connects to Connecticut's ratification of the Constitution. You know the P&D mint marks help identify where circulating examples were made. You know that hundreds of millions of these quarters were produced. And you know that the date alone doesn't make the coin rare. But you also know something much more important. You know what to look for. Condition. Mint mark. Strike. Surface. Proof characteristics. And genuine mint errors. So the next time you see a 1999 Connecticut Quarter, don't immediately spend it. Turn it over. Look at that tree. Look at the date. Check the mint mark. Study the rim. Look at the surfaces. And ask yourself one question. Is this just another Connecticut Quarter? Or is there something different about this one? Because that's what coin collecting is really about. It's not about believing that every old coin is worth a fortune. It's about learning enough to recognize the unusual one when you find it. And sometimes the coin that looks completely ordinary at first can become the coin that makes you stop and take a second look. So check your pockets, check your drawers, check your old coin jars, check those collections that have been sitting untouched for years. And if you find a 1999 Connecticut Quarter, don't just look at the year. Look at the whole coin. And if you discover something unusual, don't clean it, don't alter it, and don't rush to sell it. Get it properly examined first. Because you never know what you might have until you actually check. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1999 Connecticut State Quarter, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And tell me in the comments, do you have a 1999 Connecticut Quarter? Does yours have a P or D mint mark? Have you ever found a mint error in your pocket change? And what is the oldest quarter sitting in your collection right now? I want to hear your story, because the next interesting coin might not be inside a museum. It might not be locked inside a bank vault. It might not even be inside a collector's cabinet. It might be sitting right now, inside someone's pocket, and that person might have no idea what they're holding. So before you spend that quarter, check it. Because sometimes the smallest piece of American money can carry a surprisingly big story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next coin hunting adventure.